Also wir machen dann weiter. Yeah, we continue in English as Daria kindly told you, and I just forgot about it. Our colleagues from the Department of the Basque Studies can perfectly English speaking, and they are improving their German, but so far they were not able to present in German, so in some other edition maybe, we hope. Anyway, we'll continue in English as I said. So next to me is sitting my colleague Marijose Olaziregi, as I said, from the University of the Basque Country, from this faculty of philology. She is associate professor currently at this university. She holds a PhD in Basque literature, and she has a very wide experience as a visiting professor, as visiting professor in different universities of the world, starting from, for example, University of Constance. She was also in Chicago, University of Chicago, in the City University of New York. She holds a master studies in fiction at the University of East Anglia in the UK. She has been leading, and she has currently leading a research project on memory in the Iberian and European literatures, where we are cooperating and working together. So she has been, and her research group has been researching on literature and memory, and that related to the topic of conflict and terrorism for the last, I would say, 10 years. So she will be presenting a paper that has been prepared by her, but also by another colleague of us, Izaro Arroita, and she will tell us, and she will be presenting then the paper with the title Terrorism and Memories Conflict. So you have the word for 20 minutes, and then we'll launch the conversation between Berlin and Vitoria. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Garbiñe, for your presentation. Eskerrik asko, vielen Dank. Well, good morning, everybody. Morgan. I always begin by apologizing for not speaking German. I mean, it's the story of my life. It's truly, and it's quite disturbing. And I apologize because we are going to introduce this other language at this conference. So sorry, bear with me. No excuses. I haven't learned German, that's the truth. It's among the 4 languages I speak. I mean, the 5th one should be German, but well, I mean, I really appreciate your presence here. This presentation, as Garbiñe said, belongs in a way to a research project we are pursuing at our group. It's a quite young and very varied and, a group, consolidated, they call it. And we have a German branch, as you can see. I mean, we analyze Basque literature mostly, but Garbiñe and her colleagues, they are, dialoguing with us when it comes to conflictive memories. And I'm really thankful for that. My presentation today is going to be on behalf of my colleague Izaro Arroita. So we both wrote this brief presentation, but she couldn't come here. So I'm going to be the one who is presenting in front of everybody, of you all. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to read most of the time. I apologize for that too. The PowerPoint I'm using today is quite simple and no complications. I only, copied some quotes. And I would like to begin with your first lesson of Basque language. It's not going to be a very deep lesson, but maybe we should speak about the polysemy of the term aberri, as we say it in Basque, or HEIMAT, homeland in Basque, okay? It's interesting because I'm going to talk about conflictive memories, and most of the time about terrorism, about ETA. But you know what? ETA was not supposed to be ETA, but I mean, in the 50s, when they decided about the name that they are going to name the group, there was a huge controversy because they wanted to introduce the term HEIMAT or Aberria, you know, in the acronym. So they wanted Aberri, in fact, in Basque means Aba, father, and Eri, people and country. And it's a neologism that the founder of Basque nationalism, Sabino Arana, created at the end of the 19th century. So Aberri has these two words, you know, it's a compound noun. So ETA originally was about to be named Ata, that means homeland, HEIMAT, and freedom. So the concept of HEIMAT, of freedom, was in ETA, but that was a huge problem because Ata also means in Basque duck, you know, the animal. So there was a controversy, and they decided to name it ETA. So we see that from the beginning, when the terrorist group was created in 1959, the idea of HEIMAT was inside the group and inside all the theories that they were trying to defend from a Marxist and Leninist point of view, okay? And that means a lot, because you will see that in the novels, and I'm going to talk about contemporary Basque novels, written originally in Basque, there's always a kind of reflection, analysis about the border, about the profile of the HEIMAT, okay? So let's begin with the reading. If you don't understand something, please, stop wherever you want, and I can repeat whatever you need, okay? So, the objective of this brief presentation is going to be to reflect on the importance of rememorizing our conflictive past in the current conceptualization of the Aberria or Basque homeland, HEIMAT. And in order to do so, we will focus on an analysis of two novels published when the terrorist group, ETA, had already announced its definitive cessation of armed activity in 2011. I'm going to analyze two novels. The title of the first one is Guerra Txikia, The Little War, by Lander Garro, and the second one is Atertu Arte Itxaron. You have the title here in Basque. I'm reading in Basque, Atertu Arte Itxaron, and we could translate that into English as Wait Until It Clears Up. And the writer is a female writer, Katisha Aguirre. You see that our writers are quite young. Basque literature, contemporary Basque literature is very lively, with lots of writers, more than 300, they say. I don't know if we have so many readers, but we have lots of writers, to be absolutely frank. But, and these are the covers of the books. A critical reading of these works also allow us to reflect on how the terrorist group's disappearance may have influenced the development of memory narratives about the conflict. The choice of the novels is also justified by the fact that both present a feature common to many current Basque novels on the conflict, namely the coexistence of distinct memories that often provoke a conflict of stories, but that also generate a context in which different discourses of memory feed off and nourish one another. Daria spoke about this too. Among other contributions, at the theoretical level, we are interested in those of Astrid Earle and Neumann, which have pointed out that the literary text can integrate distinct discourses about our visions of the past, creating a mnemonic multi-perspectivity. We are interested likewise in concepts such as multi-directional memory, coined by Rothberg, to explain that literature can show us an intercultural dynamics, the interactions and negotiations that are established in rememorizing distinct traumatic past. Silverman, for his part, suggests the term palimpsestic memory in order to refer to those productive interactions that might be established in combining in the text different voices, moments, and experiences of violence and trauma. We are then faced with literary arguments that revisit the past and that, moreover, in invoking it, situate that conflictive past within the context of global conflictive memories. I'm not going to discuss about the differences of these three terms. I'm considering them because they all include different kind of memories that struggle and discuss, dialogue between them. And especially because they have a kind of global dimension in most of the times. So, I'm going to use them as synonyms, more or less, and as tools. Additionally, the novel chosen, they also present a second feature, namely that the stories they narrate use displacement as a central characteristic of their stories. Whether this is of a forced kind, such as the exile present in the first novel, in Guerra Chiquilla, or whether due to professional reasons, such as academic training, as in the expatriate exile present in the second novel, A Tertuarte y Charon. These displacements in reality are temporary and would not be examples in the strict sense of what experts today refer to as itinerant HEIMAT. I'm quoting Eichmann, of course, which embraces the hybridity and dislocation to which Achun Appadurai referred in Modernity at Large. But such displacements do serve, without any doubt, to reflect on the peculiarities of the Basque HEIMAT, its internal contradictions due to the political border between the two states of France and Spain in the first novel, on the one hand, as well as the image projected by our homeland in the second novel by Aguirre. We would argue that both analyze the current contours of our homeland, HEIMAT, on the basis of the conflictive memories that converge in their novels. So let's go with the first novel. The conflict scene from home, Guerra Chiquilla, The Little War by Lander Garro. One of the peculiarities worth highlighting in Basque language novels of the last 2 decades, when I talk about Basque literature, we need to keep in mind that Basques, write in 3 different languages at least. In Basque, in Spanish and in French. I'm going to talk about the literature written in Basque originally, and so we should, precise that one. And when I talk about Basque language novels, I'm talking, a very varied group, but the main trend is the literature on the conflict or on our conflictive memories, like the Civil War. That's the main trend nowadays, and there are more than 80 novels, more or less, that have been published since the 70s until now about, this kind of conflictive memory. So we have a memory boom too. So I will repeat the sentence. One of the peculiarities worth highlighting in Basque language novels of the last decades is the appearance of more or less autobiographical narrations of protagonists from the world of ETA. So the novel we are going to talk about is a very autobiographical. The father of the father was a member of ETA. His 2 siblings, the sister and the brother, are still. So, it's the son, the youngest one, who speaks about the story of the family. And this is absolutely new. So in theory, we have the son of a perpetrator telling the story of the family, the Little War. Guerra Chiquilla narrates the story of Xavier Ugarte and his family during the years they had to go in exile in Hendaye. It's Xavier's innocent gaze which drives the narration, a convincing gaze and tone that gather pace in the novel that we could classify as a Bildungsroman. The thing is that Guerra Chiquilla, the novel, is moreover a story of Xavi's awakening in the face of the Basque political reality during tough 80s, marked by the violence of ETA and the GAL, the paramilitary group GAL, as well as drugs. Among slogans in support of amnesty and the Basque political refugees, the family will go from house to house and will experience in its bones a lack of means and fear of a possible attack. Homeland, or HEIMAT, is everything for a father that finds it difficult to show affection to anybody and does not give in it. No, does not give in to any of his children's wishes. The image of the father, his description is horrible. Is a very authoritarian, bully, horrible father. Terrified by the idea that in the same way as his friends Emilio and Chomin, he might be the next target for the GAL, the father uproots his family towards a destination, Hendaya, a town that in the eyes of the children feels almost ghostly. A community of Basques lives free there, which takes them in and which in reality lives as if they were in a ghetto, separated from the real Hendaya. Hendaya is in the French side. I mean, it's the French Basque country. I should, remark that. That is where Xavi will experience his first loves, his first problems at school, as well as a claustrophobic sensation on account of the storage room bedroom in which they must sleep. Gotzon, the older brother, will come to best exemplify opposition to paternal authority. Someone close to punk aesthetics and thought, an admirer of songs by Basque music groups like Cortatu, Leño, Sex Pistols, La Polla Records, almost incomprehensible for little Xavi. Gotzon demonstrates a tough behavior and language, riddled with military terms, and which emphasizes to his little brother, Xavi, that in reality they are in the middle of a war. And this is the first quote from the novel. I have translated that into English for you, okay? What Xavi would have really liked was to go back to Errenteria, I mean their original village in the Spanish side, and regain his old life, or not exactly his life, with its failures, but rather the triviality of that past life, the certainty that things were and would continue to be forever. That is what he would have wanted, a life without fear, and unknown people that ask questions which require exaggerated and false answers, end of quote. The reflection of the novel of our conflict, wars capitalized, and the little war, I mean the domestic, is very interesting. The constant opposition between the sides of memory which abound in the French Basque area, such as the bunkers constructed by the Nazis in the Second World War, remind Xavi that he is in a geographically terrain marked by memories of tragic wars that make the limitations they experience at home very small. Second quote. Xavi thought it incredible that the Nazis had been in the same place in which he was now, and the whole matter of the house and the living room seemed to him small and insignificant. End of quote. It is without doubt an example of multi-directional memory in which memories of other conflicts and wars combine and confront current conflicts. This is the case too of the mother's interpretation of terror that they experienced after the assassination of the refugee Chomin at the hands of the GAL, the paramilitary group GAL. The mother has no doubts when comparing it to the terror with capital letters, that grandfather Paco experienced in the Civil War. Third quote. Then she began to speak about Aitona Paco and said that he spent his whole life in fear without being able to express in words what he had experienced in the war, and that he died in the same way, silently and without uttering even a single complaint. A war of 3 years and 40 years of silence, she said. That is the power of terror. End of quote. We are interested in turn in underscoring the reflection that the novel makes about homeland or Heimat, about the contradictions and dislocation that the political border establishes between the continental Basque country, Iparralde, we say that in Basque, and the peninsular Basque country, Hegoalde. As Maitane Ostolaza, a professor, I think she's now at Université de Nantes in France, as Maitane Ostolaza clearly pointed out, the Iparralde of French side is an important symbol and site of memory for Basques, and the term, coined in the 30s of the last century, has been incorporated into the ideological evolution of Basque nationalism. Transformed during the harsh years of the Franco dictatorship into a small oasis for the Basque language and culture, it is currently the other for the peninsular area, with an identity and contradictions well narrated in a novel by, for example, there's a Basque writer, a female, very interesting female Basque writer in the French part, Izaro Borda, and she wrote a novel, the title is 100% Basque, 100% Basque. And she analyzes the stereotypes of being Basque in the French part, the traditionalism, Catholicism, stereotypes when it comes to authenticity, cheese, obsession of food. You know, it's a very interesting novel. However, in Garro's novel, in the novel we are analyzing, it becomes a terrain inhabited by refugees, representatives of that homeland or Heimat that has become a hell, condemned to perpetuating their social and political fracture. The people will not forgive, they say all the time, and who dream of a neutral territory, a Basque country, of small dimensions, but at the end of the day, independent. The second novel we are going to analyze, Atertu Arte Itxaron, by Katisha Aguirre, is without doubt another of novels that has most accurately reflected on the post-ETA period. It's a road novel in which Ulia, the protagonist from Vitoria-Gasteiz, a mezzo-soprano gaining her doctorate in musicology through a thesis on rhythm and pacifism, sets out on a journey by car with her partner Gustavo, a university professor of international law, through the Basque country in the summer of 2011, when ETA had already declared its ceasefire. In reality, there are 3 stories in the novel and 3 different narrative planes. First, we have the story of the journey itself, with abundant flashbacks about their relationship, which began during the 2004 Islamist terrorist attack, 11 March in Madrid. Second, there are lots of analepses which reveal Ulia's family genealogy with parents who met during the traumatic events of the 3rd of March in 1976 in Vitoria-Gasteiz, and which will result, in the case of her father, in a terrible trajectory in ETA and a future in prison. Third, there is the most theoretical plane in which the narrator reflects on the life of Benjamin Britten, his pacifism during the Second World War, as well as his refusal to adopt a Basque child exiled in England during the Civil War. 3 stories in sum captured in a work which clearly defines its textual foil, Gustavo, the boyfriend, and which in reality becomes a confession about the identity of Ulia's father, José María Ortiz de Zárate, an ETA member who has been sent to prison for 980 years for participating in terrible and real attacks such as that in Guzmán el Bueno Street in Madrid. One should highlight, moreover, the coincidence that all the relationships in the novel become marked and very conditioned by armed violence of whatever kind. This is a reality in which the memories of different armed conflicts do not compete among themselves, but instead work productively, as Mitchell Rothberg argues, in order to draw up a not so local map in which violence is also present. Quote, "You are suggesting waiting until it clears up. I laugh at you, poor devil," end of quote. Well, you know that it rains a lot in the Basque Country. So if you have to wait until it clears up, you are done, I mean. This is the ironic voice of the narrator, Ulia, aimed at her partner, and that could easily be one of the messages of the novel. Waiting until everything clears up, until better times come in order to face up to a problem, is not, in truth, the solution. And Ulia's main problem is, without doubt, the revelation of her mother to her about the identity of that absent father, who has marked her life. A member of ETA with a really bloody list of assassinations behind him, that while the couple are traveling through the Basque Country, is seriously ill and on hunger strike due to an increase of his sentence. The faults of the father, the burdens of the daughter, I will carry my father's guilt, she says. This is the novel's reflection on the legacy that part of the Basque society will receive, a legacy which clearly points at the collective responsibility. I'm quoting Anna Arendt, of course, and about the responsibility as a collective we have about the things we did and about the things we didn't, but we are responsible for everything. As an unknown past for Ulia, but one which bothers her during her trip on account of the constant images and news that both in the media and in the places they frequent, bars, streets, remind her of her father. And given that we have alluded to the media, there is a very prominent reflection in the novel on the protagonism that it has and has had in covering the so-called Basque problem. In reality, the importance that terrorism theoreticians and experts attribute to the media has always been noteworthy. Alex Huen, as it happens, speaks about the symbolic relationship between both of them. In the novel, we are addressing the huge number of news items and images following the 11 March bombings in Madrid delves into a stigma that she has as a Basque before people from outside the Basque world, the steam for being an ETA member pro-ETA. Ulia exemplifies it perfectly in her fear she has to the future of her relationship with Gustavo. She says, quote, "If in the end it was not ETA, he may call me, I may see him again," end of quote. She feels that as a Basque, she's supposed to be in Madrid a pro-ETA person, and that all her relationships, her life, is absolutely conditioned by that. We are referring to a media that Ulia criticizes for its delight in explicitly describing shattered bodies following the Islamist attacks alluded to, for its sensationalism and use of terms like reign of terror, a press that furthermore claims to have evolved since the ceasefire announcement into an excessively favorable attitude towards Basque as a reaction to the negative overexposure we have received in media. Gustavo, the boyfriend, ends up stating even that, quote, "If it were not for ETA," sorry, I forgot the PowerPoint. "If it were not for ETA, nobody would have heard anything about the enduring Basque people," end of quote. He's saying that ETA, in fact, located us on the map, on the global map, and we owe a lot to that reality. A reality that of coverage of the Basque conflict on the part of the media, which the writer Katisha Aguirre knows very well due to her position as a doctor in audiovisual communication and professor in the Faculty of Information Sciences at the University of the Basque Country. A media reality in some which horrifies Ulia for fearing the morbid interest that her father's identity could provoke among journalists like Sara, who traverses, quote, the scenes of terror in the Basque Country. And I finish soon. The journey through the Basque Country also serves to reflect on HEIMAT. The itinerary the protagonists follow sketches out a map promoted by Basque institutional campaigns, such as of being a gastronomic paradise. She says, "Come and eat it up," says Ulia, speaking ironically about a tourist slogan promoted by the Basque government in the 90s, whose flagship was the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. A very well-calculated strategy to promote the Basque Country not as a territory of a terrorist conflict, but as an example of urban regeneration and tourist pilgrimage. The culinary recipes, which the narrator includes in the novel, projects an image of HEIMAT that sells, as Ulia emphasizes, an image of economic and technological prosperity and of a privileged destination for tourists. This gives rise to the paratext of the novel, translated into Spanish as, in Spanish is Los turistas desganados. It could be translated as the apathetic tourists, which indicates an ironic and critical interpretation of this image. What the writer is telling us is that at the end, this is a strategy to promote the Basque Country beyond the Basque trouble. And this strategy was first, pursued by the Basque government in the 90s with building of the Guggenheim Museum. And nowadays, this kind of gastronomy obsession to promote Basque gastronomy all over the world with very, very, well-known campaigns, just to avoid, or to sell a good image of our country. By way of conclusion, we could argue that Basque novels which address terrorism, or terrorisms in plural, also invoke other memories of other historical events of other countries, in order to reflect on the origin and universality of the violence that has devastated the Basque Country. But what is more, this connection to other violence and terror at the global level serves to point out the perversion of its continuance, its ramifications, and the impact of that inheritance of the youngest generations, who must learn to live with those ghosts. The post-ETA novels we have analyzed do not hesitate to criticize very clearly and denounce the internal contradictions, the cross-border divisions, as well as institutional strategies that disguise as tourist slogans do not manage to cover up the political problems which still preside over the coming decades. So, eskerrik asko, vil danke.
So, thank you very much, and Daria and Marijo, for your presentations, which are connected to the presentations we have been listening to the past 2 days. Nevertheless, it's another reality, and it's another dimension what we are dealing with today. So feel free to ask questions, to comment on own opinions. Yeah.
Or to criticize or whatever you want. I mean, you're very welcome. Azpitikan.
Yeah, thank you very much for your interesting paper, both interesting papers, and this approach to contested spaces of memory or overlapping multi-directional spaces of memory in the context of, in this case, a violent conflict. And of course, I was thinking of Northern Irish literature or the Northern Ireland conflict as probably where there are quite a lot of links or similarities or parallels. And I thought what was interesting was, in a sense, I'm not quite sure if I understood it correctly, but that in those novels that you gave as examples, everyday experiences or certain, not so much, but traumatic family experiences like daughter-father relationships are maybe something that can also provide a common ground of suffering without simplifying or idealizing a place by making it a tourist destination, which is the other one, but how to create a shared memory space, a shared home space for conflicting parties. And I was thinking as a different example, and I don't know if there are novels like this in the Basque oeuvre, like this novel that won the Booker Prize in 2018 by Anna Burns, The Milkman, by a British writer who grew up in Belfast in Northern Ireland and who in a sense describes Belfast in the 1970s, but making it almost unrecognizable in an everyday experience which is traumatic for those involved, but without naming names, naming sites, therefore not making it a conflicting memory, but a shared suffering, a shared trauma because of certain gender relations, social relations, and avoiding naming sites. And I thought it might be interesting maybe also as another novel which addresses a similar issue by creating a shared memory without quite in a trivial way and also in a humorous way, but without making it seem nicer than it actually is. And the whole strategy is like the first sentence is, the day that somebody put a gun to my breast and called me a cat and threatened to shoot me was the same day the milkman died. And the novel works the whole time like this by avoiding. And I just thought in how far that's also something that's in Basque writing.
Well, thank you so much for your question. A student of mine, a colleague of mine, she defended her dissertation on a comparative approach of Irish literature and Basque literature on conflicts. Her name is Estíbaliz Esquerra, and she's now teaching at the University of South California in Santa Barbara. And she says many interesting, and there are many differences between the literature, the Irish literature on the conflict and the Basque one. In our case, the interesting issue is that critics, they have always complained that our literature began very late to show, in a way, what was going on here. There was a kind of explosion in the 90s and in the 21st century, but until then, the harsh, the most traumatic years, decades, were the 80s in the Basque Country when it comes to assassinations and bombing and whatever. There are novels that, for example, in the 80s, speak about violence a lot. Violence at the domestic sphere, and they don't mention at all the conflict. But, there are, but among the 80 novels that we have, that they have written in Basque about the issue, what is really different from the rest of the novels on terrorism is that our novel focuses or has focused for decades on the perpetrator, not on the victim. This is being contested right now because they say that, that the differences between perpetrators and victims in most of the novels are not that clear, that there is a victimization progress, and there is a gray zone, as they used to say, and that nowadays we can, but the truth is that our novel had a kind of didactic pedagogical objective. They wanted to show how could it happen? Why are we in such a horrible situation? And that's why they focus on the perpetrator. And that's why we analyze our novels, and we analyze terrorism as a discourse, as two Basque anthropologists, Zuleika and William Douglas. Well, Douglas is not originally Basque, but is an adoptive Basque. They promote it in Terror and Taboo in that book. What is different from the Irish novels on the conflict is the gender politics. That's really interesting when it comes to Basque literature, because we have, especially when it comes to novels written by women, maternity is the concept, and it's a struggling concept when it comes to show the role that Basque nationalism, no matter if that's the original, the traditional, or the Marxist-Leninist of ETA, gave to women. They are considered as mothers, as helpers, but not as a combative or combatant mothers. And there are some interesting writers, novels about conflict, as I said, written by women that try to contest this role. And they show women that are really, really active, and they want to become combatant, and they are, in fact, members of ETA, but they want to be mothers too. And this doesn't happen in Irish literature as far as I know. Our novels about the conflict are not mythical, they are not references to sacrifice of women. That is been contested completely. So that's the only thing I know, as far as I remember, that is really, really different from the Irish novels on the struggle. I don't know. I'm afraid I didn't answer to your question at all, but I tried to my best, to give you some clues.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Are you okay? Thank you.
I just thought it was interesting, this kind of to find, in a sense, linking points or zones of overlap rather than contested spaces.
Yes.
Lines. This idea of the overlap, and with which areas of experience is this done in Basque writing, and then how far does it differ from maybe Irish or other conflict literature? But thank you very much. No, that was.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. I also had a question about your talk that you gave. That was really fascinating. One point that struck me was that the memory boom here almost goes hand in hand with the memory boom in Germany, which is the 1980s, 1990s. However, there's a big difference. Now the witnesses and the Holocaust survivors are dying, which is not the case with ETA, right? So I was wondering what the role is of autobiographical fiction in the Basque literature, if there's a heavier emphasis or a stronger or more significant emphasis on novels that are written by witnesses or victims or perpetrators, such as the title that you presented. Because I remember there's this one book that was marketed as written by a Holocaust survivor, and then it turned out that it was actually not a Holocaust survivor, and it was this huge controversy, I think back in the 60s or 70s, I don't remember. So I was just wondering if you could talk about the significance in Basque literature about who's writing it. Is it fictional? Is it autobiographical fiction? Or is it actually memoirs or whatsoever?
That's a very good question. My colleagues, I think it's going to be the third talk. They are going to present a paper. My colleagues from the same group of research. Professor Ayerbe is over there, my colleague Mikkel. They are going to talk precisely about victims and perpetrators. It's going to be a fascinating paper, and that is going to give us many, many clues about that issue. you want to answer now, or you want to, because I don't want to spoil your talk. Mikel. Ah, Anna, sorry. Yeah, they are going to talk about that.
Yeah, I was not so much wondering about the victims and perpetrators in general. I was wondering within the discourse of the literature if there was a big emphasis on having experienced or
memoirs.
If in regards to how do, for example, literary critics review if something was fictionalized or not.
Yeah, I see now your point. I deleted some mentions of Basque novels because my talk was too long about this kind of autobiographical novels. They are quite new and recent, and they belong to the last decades. Memoirs are not that common among us. I have to say that women are braver in that sense when it comes to tell about their inner reasons, their experience, their personal feelings. There are not that many. I was counting, I think there were 6 novels more or less like that, but memoirs are not that common, especially from the perpetrators or for both sides. We have lots of fiction, but written by writers, professional writers. When it comes to members of ETA or ex-members or whatever, there are not that many. No, that's not common among us. For example, in South America, when it comes to the experiences of the dictatorship on the those horrible years, and this has been very analyzed and studied. Memoirs are the basis of most of the fictional works. That's not our case. It doesn't matter if you have the experience behind you and you were truly a member or not. No. I think those they are very small. It's a small percentage of novels when it comes to memoirs. No. It's not that common. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. They are not memoirs. No. It's quite a taboo thing. Because as you said, they are alive, they are young, they are very young. It's your neighbor. It's it's not that easy.
Yeah, I was wondering about.
If I may add, and this country is very small.
Yeah, I was wondering about the political implications of publishing a memoir.
You go to the market and you find always 1 or 2 writers. It's the size is small, but we know each other. And when it comes to the Basque literary system in Basque, it's smaller. So it's Patria speaks about that. Although I'm not agree with, and I want to include Daria in the discussion. I don't agree with the point of view of Fernando Aramburu about what happened here. It's true that there were many years of silence among us, and from the institutional point of view, they apologized. But it's true that I myself, I was born in '63, and I grown up with surrounded by that violence, and we used to go to concerts and sing and dress in a way that was trendy. But those were the 70s, the 80s, where the situation began to change in democracy radically, and it was tougher and tougher. And it's true. But, in the last decades, there's a huge debate and, in the society, and we are trying to realize and to accept what happened, to apologize, to recognize victims. I think that in that sense, the institutions are doing an important job, not only the institution, but the civil, the society, to the Basque society. So we are dealing with that now. But it's not that easy because everybody is, alive. They are not that old. And, it's I mean, we are talking about that and trying to accept each other, and I mean, they have, you know, big steps have been done in recent years. Can I ask something to Daria? Daria, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Are you somewhere? I found your talk very, very interesting and very thought-provoking.